You lost your job? Get out. Ethan's words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to raise, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, stood in the doorway of his $2 million Brentwood condo, arms crossed, eyes colder than the marble floors beneath his designer sneakers. Behind him, Skylar, his Instagram-famous wife, didn't even look up from her phone. Her French-manicured thumb kept scrolling, the diamond on her left hand catching the California sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Windows I'd helped pay for. "Mom, be realistic," Ethan continued, voice dripping with the same condescension he'd learned from his socialite friends. "You're 58. No one's hiring ex-personal assistants. And we can't afford dead weight." Dead weight. After 30 years of working double shifts to put him through Stanford. After selling my wedding ring to cover his emergency appendectomy. After quietly enduring Skylar's backhanded compliments about my quaint Walmart sweaters. I was dead weight. My hands shook as I zipped up the suitcase I'd barely unpacked from my last business trip for Catherine. The Uber app blinked. $14.20 to the nearest motel. My bank balance, $27.83. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ms. Carter, this is Wells Fargo Trust Services. Per the late Catherine Whitmore's instructions, $8.4 million has been deposited into your private account. Please call to discuss investment options." The hallway spun. Catherine, my boss, my mentor, the closest thing I'd had to family, had kept one final secret. No. Now the son who just threw me out had no idea the mother he discarded was worth millions. But revenge. Too easy. I wanted him to watch me rise and regret every word. The Uber's leather seats stuck to my thighs as we pulled away from the condo. I watched through the tinted window as Ethan's silhouette disappeared behind the smoked glass doors, the same doors I'd helped pick out last year when they moved in. "Where to?" the driver asked. I hesitated. The motel would drain my last $20. Then I heard Catherine's voice in my head, the way she'd always say, "Darling, never let them see you sweat." "The Peninsula, Beverly Hills, please." The driver's eyebrows shot up. I saw his eyes flick to my worn suitcase in the rearview mirror. "You sure about that, ma'am?" I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app, my fingers trembling as I entered the login. The screen refreshed. Available balance, $8,427,193.18. "Very sure," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The lobby smelled like money, jasmine, and polished marble. A chandelier the size of my first apartment glittered above the reception desk. "Welcome to the Peninsula. How may we assist you?" The clerk's smile didn't reach her eyes as she took in my discount store blouse. "I'd like your best suite. For a month." The words felt foreign in my mouth. "That would be our presidential suite at $3,500 per night. We require." I slid my black Amex across the counter. The one Catherine had gotten me for business expenses, the one I'd never dared use for personal purchases. The clerk's demeanor shifted instantly. "Of course, Ms. Carter. Eleanor Carter." For the first time in decades, I said my name like I owned it. The elevator ride to the 15th floor took 23 seconds. Just enough time for reality to sink in. The suite door opened to a sun-drenched living room larger than Ethan's entire first apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Hollywood Hills. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket with a note. "Welcome home, Ms. Whitmore's most trusted." Catherine's final gift. I collapsed onto the $15,000 sofa and finally let the tears come. They weren't tears of sadness but of fury at Ethan, at Skylar, at myself for not seeing this coming. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I silenced it. Instead, I opened Instagram and created a new account at Golden Years Glow Up. My first post, a photo of the champagne flute against the sunset, captioned, "When life gives you lemons," by the whole damn orchard. The comments started pouring in within minutes. "Is that the Peninsula?" "At Travel Addict, new life goals." "At Retirement Dreams, Mrs. C." "Is this real?" "Jake, Ethan's college roommate." I smiled for the first time in months. Let the rumor mill begin. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as I sipped my $25 green juice. My phone buzzed incessantly on the marble countertop, Ethan's 14th unanswered call this morning. I swiped it aside and scrolled through my now 5,000-follower Instagram instead. A knock at the suite door interrupted my browsing. Marcus Wellington, my new attorney, stood there looking every bit the shark-eyed hired tailored navy suit, sharp features, and a smile that said he lived for destroying people like Ethan. "Miss Carter," he greeted, setting a leather briefcase on the dining table. "I've reviewed your situation. You're going to love what I found." He spread out documents like a blackjack dealer. "First, the gift you gave Ethan for his down payment? Never reported to IRS. That's tax fraud." His finger tapped another page. "Second, their mortgage is 3 months behind. And third." A predatory grin spread across his face. "Skylar's influencer income? Let's just say the FTC would have questions about her #ad disclosures." I nearly choked on my juice. "How did you? Background checks are my love language." He slid a contract toward me. "Sign here and by tomorrow we'll own their mortgage debt through an LLC. They'll be paying rent to you." My pen hovered over the signature line. A year ago I would have balked at this. No. I signed with a flourish. Marcus's phone pinged. "Speaking of." He turned the screen toward me, a TMZ alert with Skylar's face. "Influencer Skylar Ray accused of faking brand deals." I burst out laughing. Karma worked fast these days. My own phone rang again. Ethan. This time I answered. "Mom. What the hell is going on?" His voice cracked with panic. "Skylar's sponsors are dropping her and the bank called about some problem with your mortgage?" I finished sweetly. "How unfortunate." Silence. "Then, you did this?" I watched a maid service clean the suite across from mine through the window. "You told me to be realistic, Ethan. So I am." I hung up. That evening, as I dressed for dinner at the hotel's rooftop restaurant, my phone exploded with notifications. A gossip site had picked up my Instagram post, speculating about my mysterious fortune. Comments poured in. "Queen giving her ungrateful son what he deserves. That's what happens when you mess with mama. Need her to teach a masterclass on revenge." I snapped a mirror selfie in my new designer dress, the first I'd ever bought for myself. Caption: "The best revenge is living well." Also lawyers. #karma. As the elevator descended, my phone buzzed with a new message. Not Ethan this time. Jake, his old roommate. "Mrs. C. Ethan's losing it. He says you've gone crazy with power. Also, any chance you need a 28-year-old adoptive son? Asking for a friend." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my champagne. The game was just beginning. The maitre d' at the roof garden nearly dropped his reservation book when I walked in. "Miss Carter. Your unexpected fame precedes you." He gestured to the other diners, several of whom were openly staring at me, phones subtly angled in my direction. I smiled, adjusting the strap of my new Valentino dress. "Just a quiet dinner, please. Somewhere with good lighting." He seated me at the prime corner table overlooking the city, the same table where I'd seen Kardashians sitting in paparazzi photos. My martini had just arrived when a commotion erupted at the entrance. Ethan stood there, tie askew, arguing with the host. "I just want to talk to my mother." Every phone in the restaurant immediately pointed his way. The TMZ effect in real time. The maitre d' glanced at me. I gave a tiny nod. Ethan stormed over, his face flushed. "What the hell are you doing, Mom? Do you have any idea what you've—" "Ethan, darling," I interrupted, sipping my drink. "You're making a scene. Again." I gestured to the sea of recording phones around us. Though I suppose Skylar would appreciate the exposure. Oh wait. I pulled up her plummeting follower count on my phone. "Too bad about those brand deals." His jaw clenched. "You need to stop this. No. Call off your lawyer, fix whatever you did to our mortgage and—" "Or what?" I set down my glass with a sharp clink. "You'll throw me out?" "Oh wait." I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough that the nearby tables had to strain to hear. "You already did that. When you thought I was broke." A gasp rippled through the surrounding diners. Ethan's eyes darted to the cameras, realizing too late he'd walked into my trap. I stood, tossing my napkin on the table. "I'd say it was lovely seeing you, but we both know that's not true." As I walked away, I called over my shoulder, "Don't worry about the check, Ethan. I'll put it on your new rent bill." The restaurant erupted in murmurs. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a notification that Golden Years Glow Up had hit 50K followers. And #KarmaMama was trending. The elevator doors hadn't even closed when my phone started blowing up. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. I put him on speaker. "Eleanor, you're a goddamn genius." His voice crackled with barely contained glee. "That restaurant scene is already all over TikTok. #KarmaMama's got 12 million views and counting." I watched the numbers on my Instagram climb like a slot machine jackpot. "How's our boy Ethan taking it?" Like a toddler denied candy. He just stormed into my office demanding I drop the mortgage case. I had security escort him out. Papers shuffled in the background. But here's the juicy part. Skylar's been calling every media outlet claiming you're senile and manipulating your finances. I snorted. Let me guess, no one's biting? Worse. Tim Z just dug up her old OnlyFans account from college. The one she never told Ethan about. The elevator pinged at my floor. "Send me those links," I said, already planning my next move. "And Marcus? Let's accelerate phase 2. Back in my suite, I scrolled through the treasure trove Marcus had sent. There was Skylar in various states of undress, hawking subscription deals with captions like "Your secret college fantasy." The dates coincided perfectly with when she'd been studying abroad in Europe, the same semester Ethan had flown over to surprise her. I was drafting my next Instagram post when a notification popped up at Skylar Ray Official had tagged me. Her post showed a tearful selfie with the caption, "When family betrays you for clout. Mental health matters. #stop the hate." The comments were already brutal. "Girl, you kicked out Euro when she was broke. Where were these tears when you took her money? Funny how she cares about family now." I set down my phone just as room service arrived with dessert. A chocolate souffle that cost more than my old weekly grocery bill. The waiter hesitated. "Ms. Carter. The kitchen sent this complimentary. They're big fans of your situation." As I took my first bite, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered to hear rapid breathing. "Eleanor, it's Skylar's mother." The woman's voice trembled. "Please, you have to stop this. My daughter's falling apart." I dabbed my mouth with a linen napkin. Funny, she didn't seem concerned when I was the one being thrown out on the street. "That was different. Ethan said you had nothing left to offer?" I finished. The silence on the other end was answer enough. "Tell me, Mrs. Reynolds, how much did Skylar's wedding dress cost again? The one I worked overtime for 6 months to pay." The line went dead. I wasn't surprised. People like them only cared about consequences when they were the ones suffering. I opened my laptop and began typing. Time to share my side of the story properly. The headline wrote itself. "From dead weight to disinherited, a mother's truth." I attached every bank statement, every thankless text from Ethan, even the security footage of him tossing my suitcase into their building's lobby. As I hit publish on Medium, a new email notification popped up. The subject line made me freeze. "Catherine's final letter, to be delivered when you needed it most." My fingers trembled as I clicked open the email from Catherine's estate attorney. The attachment was a scanned handwritten letter dated just 2 weeks before her passing. The familiar looping penmanship made my throat tighten. "My dearest Eleanor. If you're reading this, it means you've discovered my little surprise, and that you've likely reached your breaking point with that ungrateful son of yours." I nearly dropped my phone. Catherine had known everything. The letter continued. "I watched for years as you poured your soul into that boy who never appreciated you. Remember when you missed my gala because he needed a last-minute ride to Coachella? Or when you took out a second mortgage to pay his law school deposits, only for him to drop out after 1 semester? A hot tear splashed onto the screen. She'd kept track of every sacrifice, every slight I'd brushed off as just what mothers do. So here's my final lesson. Some people only learn when they lose everything. The condo, the cars, Skylar's influencer career. Consider them tuition for the education Ethan desperately needs. The last paragraph stole my breath. "P.S. Check your safe deposit box. There's something there from an old friend of mine who's been following your story with great interest." I immediately called Marcus. "We need to get into my box at Wells Fargo. Now." 2 hours later, we stood in the bank's private viewing room. The box contained a single unmarked envelope. Inside were 2 items. 1. A vintage photo of Catherine with a striking silver-haired man at some 1990s charity event, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. 2. A business card with just a name and number. Victor Castellano. Call when ready. Marcus went pale. Holy shit. Victor Castellano? As in the private equity billionaire? The vulture of Wall Street? My phone chose that moment to buzz with a breaking news alert. Ethan and Skylar had given an exclusive interview to Entertainment Tonight, claiming I was being manipulated by shady financial advisors and pleading for a private family reconciliation. I looked at the business card, then at Marcus. How fast can you set up a press conference? His grin was feral. How does noon tomorrow at the Peninsula sound? That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Part of me still ached with motherly guilt. But Catherine's words echoed in my mind. Some people only learn when they lose everything. At 3:17 a.m. I finally picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang exactly twice before a smooth baritone answered. Eleanor. I've been expecting your call. Victor Castellano's private helicopter touched down on the peninsula's rooftop pad precisely at 7 a.m. I watched through the suite's telescope as the silver-haired billionaire emerged, his custom Brioni suit untouched by the rotor wash. He moved with the dangerous grace of a panther, exactly as he'd looked in that photo with Catherine 20 years ago. My phone buzzed with Marcus's text. He brought lawyers. Good ones. Play this smart. A knock at the door. Victor stood there holding 2 coffees from the shop where Catherine and I used to go every Sunday. Black 2 sugars, he said, handing me a cup. Just like she remembered. The casual intimacy of the gesture threw me off balance. You knew Catherine well. His smile didn't reach his ice-blue eyes. We were close. Before her marriage. After too, though discreetly. He strode past me into the suite. She wrote me about you often. Her brilliant, kind, exploited assistant. Victor set down his briefcase, an old-fashioned leather thing that probably cost more than my first house. When Catherine's letter arrived last week explaining her plans for you, I must admit I was intrigued. He pulled out a tablet showing live footage of Ethan and Skylar protesting outside my bank. But this? You've exceeded even her expectations. I sipped the perfectly sweetened coffee, buying time. What exactly did Catherine tell you? That you deserved justice. And spectacle. His finger swiped to a financial chart. Your son's condo is just the beginning. Did you know he took out a $500,000 small business loan last year? For a media company that never filed taxes. The numbers blurred before my eyes. He told me that money was for medical bills. Victor's laugh was cold. It bought Skylar a Birkin collection. The bank's been looking for him since March. He leaned forward. Here's what I propose. You give me control of your social media empire for 30 days. I'll handle the business while you focus on family reconciliation. Marcus stiffened beside me. I studied Victor's expressionless face. And what do you get out of this? The same thing Catherine did. He tapped the tablet, bringing up a live feed of my now 1.2 million Instagram followers. Entertainment. The peninsula's ballroom buzzed with over 50 journalists. Camera flashes reflected off the crystal chandeliers as I adjusted the microphone. Victor stood in the shadows, arms crossed, watching his investment pay off. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I'm here to correct some misconceptions about my family situation. A reporter shouted, Is it true you're cutting your son out of your new fortune? I smiled sadly. Ethan made his choice when he valued money over family. Though I understand he's suddenly very interested in reconciliation. I tapped the clicker, projecting bank statements onto the screen behind me. After draining $287,000 from joint accounts over 3 years. The room erupted. I continued over the noise. As for Skylar's claims about my mental state. Another click revealed her DMs to a plastic surgeon. How soon can you fix my nose? My Richimal's finally kicking it. Sent the day after Catherine's funeral. A CNN correspondent stood. Ms. Carter, what's your response to allegations you're being manipulated by Victor Castellano? Victor stepped forward before I could answer. I think the real question is. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Who's been manipulating whom? He nodded to Marcus, who distributed folders to the press. Inside you'll find evidence of Ethan and Skylar's secret offshore accounts, funded by money meant for Eleanor's retirement. I stared at Victor. This wasn't part of our script. The room dissolved into chaos as reporters scrambled through the documents. My son's face, pale and sweating, appeared in the doorway. Our eyes met just as a federal marshal stepped forward with handcuffs. "Ethan Carter? You're under arrest for wire fraud and tax evasion." The courtroom erupted as the marshals led Ethan away in handcuffs. His screams of "Mom, tell them this is a mistake," echoed through the marble halls until the heavy doors slammed shut. I stood frozen, my revenge fantasy suddenly tasting like ashes in my mouth. Victor's hand closed around my elbow. "We should go," he murmured. "The vultures are circling." He wasn't wrong. Reporters were already shoving microphones in our direction, shouting questions about trusts and plea deals. In the back of the armored town car, I finally found my voice. "You knew. This whole time you knew they were going to arrest him." Victor poured 2 fingers of bourbon from the limo's bar. "Catherine's investigators uncovered the fraud 6 months ago. She wanted to give him a chance to come clean." He handed me the glass. He didn't. The amber liquid burned my throat. So this was never about my Instagram or the condo. Of course it was. Victor's smile was razor thin. The financial crimes just expedited things. He pulled out his phone showing Skylar's latest Instagram story, a tearful video in front of their now foreclosed home. "Look at her. Already distancing herself. By sundown she'll be claiming she was Ethan's first victim." I stared at the screen. The girl who'd mocked my thrift store sweaters now looked genuinely terrified. It should have felt satisfying. That I just felt tired. "What happens now?" Victor produced a thick envelope. "That depends on you. Ethan's facing 7 to 10 years. Unless." He let the word hang between us. I opened the envelope to find a signed affidavit. Ethan would walk free. In exchange for every asset he and Skylar owned. And one more condition. Public apology? My voice cracked. "You want him to confess everything on Good Morning America?" Victor's eyes gleamed. Catherine believed in second chances. But she also believed in consequences. He leaned forward. "This way he learns. Without becoming another prison statistic." The car pulled up to my hotel. Through the tinted windows I saw paparazzi already camped out front. Victor handed me a pen. "Your move, Eleanor." I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about what kind of mother, what kind of woman, I wanted to be. The pen hovered over the signature line. The Good Morning America green room smelled of stale coffee and hairspray. I adjusted my earpiece while watching the monitor where Ethan sat stiffly under studio lights, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. The children below screamed, "Son's shocking confession, how I stole from my mother." 30 seconds, Miss Carter, the producer said, adjusting my mic pack. "You sure you want to do this live? We could pre-tape." "I'm sure." My reflection in the monitor showed a woman I barely recognized. Chin lifted, eyes sharp. The Eleanor from 2 months ago would have been sick with nerves. Today I felt nothing but cold resolve. The stage manager counted down. The familiar theme music played. Then Robin Roberts was introducing us. In a GMA exclusive, Eleanor Carter and the son who betrayed her. The camera swung to me. "Ethan," I began, my voice steady. "Before we discuss the affidavit you signed, I want to ask, when did I become disposable to you?" The studio audience gasped. Ethan's hands trembled on the desk. "It wasn't like that, Mom," Skylar said. "Ah yes, Skylar." I tapped my tablet, pulling up security footage from their condo building. The time stamp showed the day after Catherine's funeral. Ethan and Skylar laughing while packing my things into trash bags. His voice rang clear, finally free of the old baggage. The clip went viral before our segment even ended. During the commercial break, Ethan grabbed my arm. "How could you do this to me?" His breath reeked of mint and desperation. "I'm your son." I pried his fingers off one by one. "Funny, you only remember that when you need something." Back on air, Robin read the terms of his confession. Complete asset forfeiture, 3 years probation and, most damning, 500 hours of community service. At a senior center. The internet exploded before we left the studio. #KarmaMama trended worldwide. Memes of Ethan's stunned face flooded Twitter. Someone created a free Skylar parody account. But the real surprise waited in my dressing room. Victor holding 2 glasses of champagne, and a manila envelope marked Catherine's final gift. Your son was just the opening act, he said, handing me the envelope. The main event begins now. Inside were photos of a much younger me, waitressing at a diner in 1989. And standing beside me in one shot, barely recognizable without his signature silver hair, Victor Castellano. The photograph trembled in my hands. The diner's neon sign, Mel's 24-hour grill, glowed behind our younger selves. Victor's hand rested on my shoulder in the faded image, his smile warm and unfamiliar. You don't remember. Victor's statement hung between us, not a question. He took the photo and traced the edge with his thumb. Summer of '89. You were saving for college. I was just another finance bro grabbing coffee before work. My stomach twisted. Catherine knew you from before me? Victor's laugh was bitter. She was my fiancée at the time. He pulled another photo from the envelope. Catherine in a wedding dress, Victor beside her in a tux. The date stamp, June 1990. Called it off 3 days before the ceremony when she found me with someone else. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Me. That someone was me. The night came rushing back. The handsome regular who'd stayed until closing, the bottle of cheap wine shared in the empty diner, the motel room I'd snuck out of at dawn. I'd never known his last name. Victor's voice dropped. Catherine never told you because by the time she hired you she'd already recognized you. And she had other plans. The dressing room walls seemed to close in. All those years working side by side, her sudden generosity, even introducing me to her investment banker nephew who became Ethan's father. It had all been part of some elaborate revenge scheme. My phone buzzed with an emergency news alert. Skylar was live on Instagram, waving what looked like legal documents. I have proof Eleanor Carter planned this whole thing. She's been manipulating. Victor snatched the phone and shut it off. We need to move. Now. He pulled me toward the emergency exit just as pounding footsteps echoed down the hallway. As we burst into the alley, the reality hit me. Catherine hadn't been my savior. I'd been her pawn in a 30-year game of vengeance. And now somehow I'd become the player instead of the piece. The black town car peeled away from the studio just as paparazzi flooded the alley. Victor's driver wove through Manhattan with practiced ease while I stared at the damning photos spread across the leather seat. You're telling me, I said slowly, that Catherine spent 30 years orchestrating this? That she groomed me, set me up with her nephew, waited for my marriage to fail, all to get revenge on you through Ethan? Victor poured 2 fingers of whiskey from the car bar. Not just revenge. A test. He handed me the glass. She wanted to see which of us would break first. You from the betrayal, me from watching you destroy our son. The liquor burned my throat. Our son. The car hit a pothole making the photos shift. One I hadn't noticed before slid into view. A hospital bassinet with a tiny hand gripping an adult finger. The date stamp, Ethan's birthday. My vision tunneled. You're saying? Biologically. Victor finished. Yes. Catherine's nephew was sterile. She arranged everything. His jaw tightened. I didn't know until last year when she was dying. The city lights blurred outside the window. Every memory of Catherine, every kindness, every piece of career advice, now took on sinister undertones. She hadn't been mentoring me. She'd been programming me. My phone buzzed with Marcus's caller ID. I put it on speaker. You need to see this, he said tersely. A video link popped up. Skylar standing beside a gray-haired man I recognized as Richard Whitmore, Catherine's longtime attorney. Documents prove Eleanor Carter conspired to defraud her own son, Whitmore declared. Mrs. Castellano's reel will leaves everything to charity. What Eleanor received was part of an elaborate. Victor snatched the phone and ended the call. Whitmore was Catherine's failsafe, he muttered. If you showed mercy to Ethan, he'd release the real will. If you pursued revenge. He trailed off as we both understood. Catherine had trapped us all. The car pulled up to a private airfield where a jet waited. Victor turned to me. Last chance to walk away. Board that plane and we finish this her way. Stay here and you'll spend the next decade in court. I looked at the photos one last time, at the young waitress who'd dreamed of a better life, at the baby who'd become my greatest joy and deepest heartbreak. Then I reached for my bag. Where are we going? I asked as I stepped onto the tarmac. Victor's smile held no warmth. Where all good revenge stories end. Switzerland. The private jet touched down in Zurich as dawn painted the Alps in hues of rose gold. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Catherine's face, not the frail woman from her final days, but the vibrant socialite who'd taken me under her wing all those years ago. Had there ever been genuine affection in her mentorship, or had I always been just a pawn in her game? Victor's gloved hand tightened around mine as we descended the stairs. The bank opens in 2 hours. We should. Tell me everything, I interrupted, my breath fogging in the crisp alpine air. No more half-truths. If I'm walking into that vault, I deserve to know what Catherine left me besides a trail of broken lives. Victor studied me for a long moment before nodding toward a waiting limousine. Not here. The car wound through Zurich's pristine streets while Victor revealed Catherine's endgame. The Swiss vault didn't just contain documents. It held evidence of financial crimes spanning 3 decades, enough to implicate powerful figures across 3 continents. Catherine's final revenge wasn't just against Victor or me. It was against the entire corrupt system that had created them all. Including you? I asked pointedly. Victor's smile was grim. Especially me. She knew I'd be the one to bring you here. He produced a key from his pocket, an old-fashioned skeleton key that looked straight out of a Gothic novel. This opens your half of the vault. Mine requires retinal scanning. She designed it so we'd have to work together to access the full contents. The bank loomed before us, its neoclassical facade belying the technological fortress within. As we approached the entrance, my phone buzzed with an international number. Don't answer that, Victor warned. But I recognized the country code. It's Ethan. I swiped to answer. Mom. His voice sounded raw, younger than I'd heard in years. Skylar left. Took everything that wasn't nailed down. Whitmore says. A choked sob. He says I might owe back taxes on the condo. Like 7 figures worth. I closed my eyes against the sudden sting of tears. Even now, after everything, my first instinct was to comfort him. Victor watched me carefully, waiting to see which version of Eleanor would respond, the betrayed mother or the avenging angel. The vault door loomed before us, its polished steel gleaming under the bank's ambient lighting. Somewhere behind that door lay the final pieces of Catherine's labyrinthine revenge. And perhaps, if I was very lucky, a way out of it. The private banker's polished Oxfords clicked against the marble floor as he led us deeper into the vault's secure corridor. Your dual authentication deposit box requires both physical key and biometric verification, he explained in crisp English. Mr. Castellano's retina scan first, then Mrs. Carter's key. Victor leaned into the retinal scanner, its red light tracing the unique patterns of his iris. A soft chime sounded. The banker turned to me expectantly. The skeleton key felt heavy in my hand. As I slid it into the lock, the mechanism emitted a series of precise clicks that echoed through the sterile chamber. The vault door hissed open, revealing a modest-sized safe deposit box containing 3 items. 1. A sealed envelope marked for Eleanor's eyes only in Catherine's looping script. 2. A USB drive encased in sleek titanium. 3. A vintage Montblanc pen, the same model Catherine had used to sign every contract that built her empire. Victor reached for the USB drive, but I blocked his hand. Mine first, I said, picking up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, I found a single sheet of stationery and a smaller key taped to the page. Catherine's familiar lavender scent still clung to the paper. My dearest Eleanor. If you're reading this, you've followed the trail to its end. By now you know the ugly truth. I used you as cruelly as life used me. But this game was never about Victor or even Ethan. A cold droplet splashed onto the paper. I hadn't realized I was crying. It was about power, who wields it, who suffers from it, and who learns to transcend it. The USB contains enough evidence to destroy dozens of powerful men, including Victor should you choose. The key opens a second box here in Zurich containing $87 million. Clean money, yours free and clear. Victor was watching me intently. I angled the letter away and kept reading. The pen is my final lesson. Every empire begins with a single stroke. Yours starts today. Whatever you decide, vengeance or mercy, do it unapologetically. And Eleanor? For what it's worth. I'm sorry. The banker cleared his throat. There appears to be a secondary authentication. He pointed to a nearly invisible keyhole beneath the deposit box. "Your key, madam?" I looked at the small key taped to Catherine's letter, then at Victor's expectant face. In that moment I understood the true nature of Catherine's game, not a test of revenge but of discernment. She'd forced me to see the world as it really was, not as I wished it to be. My fingers closed around the Montblanc pen. Felt like holding a loaded weapon. The secondary keyhole gleamed under the vault's cold lighting. I held Catherine's final key between my fingers, acutely aware of Victor's gaze burning into me. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "whatever she told you." Silence. The word came out sharper than I intended. The banker discreetly excused himself, leaving us alone with Catherine's legacy. I inserted the small key into the hidden lock. A panel slid open, revealing a single sheet of paper. A notarized document transferring full control of Catherine's media empire to me, effective immediately. No conditions. No contingencies. Victor's breath hitched. "She gave you everything." "Not everything." I tapped the USB drive. "This contains the rest." My fingers hovered over it, imagining the damage it could do. To Victor, to Ethan, to all the powerful players Catherine had spent decades documenting. Victor surprised me then. He stepped back, hands raised in surrender. "It's your choice. But before you decide." He reached into his jacket and produced a folded photograph, recent judging by the silver streaks in his hair. It showed him standing outside Ethan's apartment building, watching from a distance as our son carried groceries inside alone. "I've been keeping tabs on him since he was born." Catherine never knew. The raw pain in his eyes undid me. In that moment I saw not the ruthless billionaire, but a father who'd been forced to watch his child from afar. Just as I'd been forced to watch Ethan become a stranger. I made my decision. 2 hours later we stood on the tarmac of Zurich Airport. Victor held the USB drive containing enough evidence to topple empires. I clutched the documents that made me CEO of a media conglomerate. "You're really going back to him?" Victor asked as the jet engines whined to life. I thought of Ethan's broken voice on the phone. Of Skylar's betrayal. Of Catherine's apology. "He's still my son." Victor nodded slowly. "And the $87 million? A smile tugged at my lips. "Let's just say I have plans for it." I boarded the plane before he could respond, the Montblanc pen heavy in my pocket. As we ascended through the clouds, I opened my laptop to a blank document. The cursor blinked expectantly. For the first time in months I knew exactly what to write. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came after. 1 year later. The scent of fresh ink filled my office as I signed the final paperwork for the Redemption Project. My new media platform dedicated to investigative journalism and second chances. The Montblanc pen glided smoothly across the page, just as Catherine had taught me all those years ago. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Marcus stepped in, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "You have a visitor." Before I could ask who, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He looked different. Older, leaner, his designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a worn-in sweater. The arrogance in his posture had softened into something more uncertain. In his hands he held a manila envelope. "Mom," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. The last time we'd spoken it had been through lawyers. Now here he was, unannounced. He placed the envelope between us. "I found this in Skylar's things before she left. I think you should see it." Inside was a single sheet of paper. A carbon copy of a contract between Skylar and Richard Whitmore, dated before Catherine's death. Payment for services rendered. Ensure Eleanor Carter is discredited and cut off from all assets. My breath caught. Catherine hadn't orchestrated this. Skylar had been playing her own game from the start. Ethan's voice was rough. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I studied my son, really studied him, for the first time in years." The way his hands trembled slightly, the dark circles under his eyes. He'd lost everything just like I had. "Neither did I admitted. Silence stretched between us. Then slowly I slid a business card across the desk. The logo of the Redemption Project gleaming in the afternoon light. "We're launching a new series on financial predators," I said carefully. "I could use a researcher. Someone who knows how they think." Ethan's eyes widened. "You're offering me a job?" I'm offering you a choice. He stared at the card for a long moment before taking it. When he looked up, his expression was raw with something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. Outside my office window, the sun dipped below the skyline, casting the city in gold. Somewhere Catherine was laughing. Not in triumph but in satisfaction. Her game was over. Mine was just beginning. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.